2 hours after Admiral Hayes's ultimatum, the last Zelthar ship disappeared from the Actari system in a flash of light as it jumped to faster-than-light travel. War Chief Drakthul and his fleet of 2,000 vessels were gone, leaving behind only the disabled Hand of Dominion and a galaxy that would never forget what had just occurred. On the bridge of the USS Valiant, Admiral Hayes stood watching the empty space where the Zelthar fleet had been. The tension that had filled the bridge for the past hours began to ease. Officers relaxed slightly at their stations, though they remained alert and professional. Captain Kate Sullivan approached with a preliminary report. Admiral, all Zelthar vessels have left the system. Long-range sensors confirm they are on a heading back to Dominion space. The disabled destroyer is requesting assistance with repairs. Their crew is alive and unharmed. Send engineering teams to help them, Hayes ordered. Give them temporary power generation equipment and the materials they need to make basic repairs. Once they can move under their own power, escort them to the edge of the system and let them go home. Sullivan nodded and moved to relay the orders. Hayes appreciated the irony. The humans had disabled the Zelthar ship as a demonstration of capability, and now they would help repair it as a demonstration of mercy. Both messages were equally important. We can hurt you, but we would rather help you. The communication system chimed with an incoming transmission from the planet's surface. Hayes recognized the signal as coming from the Actari Government Center. Put it through, he said. The screen lit up with the image of High Speaker Venna Tak. The Actari leader looked exhausted but grateful. Her large eyes, which showed emotion more clearly than human eyes did, were bright with unshed tears. Admiral Hayes, she said, her voice shaking slightly, I do not have words adequate to express what your presence here has meant to my people. You saved our world. You saved our civilization. How can we ever repay such a debt? Hayes felt uncomfortable with the gratitude. He had done what seemed right, what seemed necessary. The idea of payment or debt did not sit well with him. High Speaker, there is no debt, Hayes said firmly. You asked for help. We provided it. That is what allies do for each other. We would hope that if Earth ever faced a similar situation, others would do the same for us. Venatok made a gesture with her hands that Hayes recognized from the cultural briefings as a sign of deep respect. You use the word allies, Admiral. The Actari people would be honored to formalize such a relationship with Earth. We offer formal alliance with all the obligations and benefits that such a relationship entails. Hayes smiled. The Third Fleet does not have the authority to make such agreements, High Speaker. That decision belongs to diplomats and politicians. But I will send your offer to Earth Command with my strongest recommendation. In the meantime, we will remain in this system for at least one standard week. We want to ensure the Zelthar do not return. We also have medical teams and engineering specialists who can help with rebuilding if you need assistance. We accept your offer gratefully, Venatok said. And Admiral, please know that the galaxy will hear of what happened here. The Actari people have many friends, and we will tell everyone we meet about the day humanity stood against impossible odds to protect those who could not protect themselves. The transmission ended. Hayes turned to find Commander Ryan Blake had entered the bridge from the carrier deck. Blake looked tired but satisfied. All fighters are recovered, Blake reported. Red Squadron executed a perfect mission. 0 casualties, 0 damage to our craft, and complete success in the demonstration. Lieutenant Harper and Lieutenant Cole are requesting permission to celebrate with the rest of their squadron. Permission granted, Hayes said. They earned it. That was some of the finest flying I have seen in my career. Make sure they know I said so, Blake grinned. Will do, Admiral. They will appreciate it coming from you. Over the next 7 days, the Third Fleet remained at Actari Prime. Human engineers worked alongside Actari technicians to repair the damaged planetary shields. Human medical teams treated wounded Actari civilians in temporary field hospitals. Human security forces helped maintain order in areas where the Zelthar bombardment had destroyed local infrastructure. But more importantly, the galaxy watched and learned. News of the confrontation spread through the galactic communication networks with remarkable speed. Within days, every major species knew what had happened. The mighty Zelthar Dominion, conquerors of 17 systems, had withdrawn from Actari Prime without a fight after facing a human fleet 1/13 their size. The story evolved as it spread. Some versions claimed the humans had some kind of superweapon. Others suggested the human ships were far larger and more powerful than they appeared. A few conspiracy theories claimed the whole thing had been staged, but the basic facts remained consistent across all the versions. The Zelthar had left, the Aktari were safe, and humanity had made it happen. On Earth, in the secure council chambers beneath Geneva, a meeting was taking place. The Secretary General of United Earth sat at the head of the table, surrounded by military leaders and diplomatic advisors. Admiral Hayes participated by video link from the Valiant. "Admiral Hayes, your report has been reviewed by this council," the Secretary General said. "The consensus is that you made the correct decisions at every stage of the operation. You achieved the mission objective without a single casualty on any side. That is remarkable." "Thank you, sir," Hayes replied. "But I should note that success was only possible because of the quality of the crews under my command. Every officer, every pilot, every technician performed flawlessly. They deserve the credit." One of the diplomatic advisors leaned forward. "Admiral, we have been receiving communications from dozens of species regarding the Aktari incident. Most are positive. Many are requesting meetings to discuss possible defense agreements or military cooperation. A few are expressing concern about human military capabilities." "What kind of concerns?" Hayes asked. "Primarily from species who are allied with or dependent on the Zelthar Dominion. They are worried that humanity might use similar tactics against them. There are also some species who are simply nervous about any display of military force regardless of the context." The Secretary General spoke up. "We are drafting a formal statement for release to the Galactic Senate. The basic message will be that humanity acted to prevent genocide and used the minimum force necessary to achieve that objective. We will emphasize that Earth seeks cooperation and peace but will respond to threats against innocent populations." "Does that align with your view of the situation, Admiral?" Hayes considered carefully before responding. "Sir, I think it is important that we are clear about our intentions without being threatening. The galaxy needs to understand that humanity will defend the weak and oppose aggression, but we are not seeking to become the galaxy's police force. We responded to Aktari Prime because they asked for help, and because it was the right thing to do. We would respond to similar situations in the future, but we are not looking for fights." "Understood," the Secretary General said. "Your input has been valuable, Admiral. You and the Third Fleet are authorized to remain at Aktari Prime for as long as you deem necessary. Once you are satisfied that the situation is stable, you may return to your regular patrol duties." The meeting ended, and Hayes closed the communication link. He sat back in his command chair and thought about the past week. So much had changed. The Third Fleet had entered the Aktari system as a relatively unknown quantity in galactic military affairs. They were leaving as something else entirely, a force to be respected, a potential ally for the weak, a potential threat for the strong. On the 10th day after the Zelthar withdrawal, High Speaker Venatok held a formal ceremony in the capital city of Aktari Prime. Thousands of Aktari citizens gathered in the Grand Plaza to honor the human fleet that had saved their world. Admiral Hayes attended, along with Captain Sullivan, Commander Blake, and a small security detail. General Thonmao presented Hayes with a crystal sculpture, a traditional Aktari symbol of eternal friendship. "This crystal is from the mountains of our northern continent," Thonmao explained. "It is said to hold the light of our sun even in darkness. We give it to those who have been a light to us in our darkest hour." Hayes accepted the gift with genuine gratitude. He had received many medals and honors in his military career, but few had meant as much as this simple crystal from a species he had just met. When it was time for speeches, Hayes kept his brief. "The Aktari people showed great courage during their time of trial. You endured months of siege without giving up hope. You continued to fight even when the odds seemed impossible. The Third Fleet did not save you. We simply gave you the time and space to save yourselves. Your courage and determination are what truly won this battle." Captain Jake Martinez stared at the swirling vortex on his view screen and knew they had made a terrible mistake. The experimental faster-than-light drive had been humming along perfectly for 3 days, pushing the exploration vessel Aurora through unexplored space at speeds humanity had only dreamed about. Then the readings went crazy, alarms started blaring, and before anyone could react, they were being pulled into something that looked like a glowing tunnel, made of twisted light. "Hold on to something," Jake shouted over the noise. His crew grabbed their stations as the ship shook violently. The lights flickered, and for a moment everything went silent and dark. Then the Aurora burst out the other side, and the view screen lit up with a sight that made everyone freeze. They were surrounded by hundreds of ships, not human ships. These vessels were massive, elegant things that looked like they had been grown rather than built. They curved and spiraled in ways that made no engineering sense, covered in what looked like scales that glowed with soft blue light. And they were all turning toward the Aurora. Captain, said Amy Cooper from the communication station. Her voice was higher than usual. I'm picking up multiple scans. They're looking at us from every angle. Ben Crawford, the chief engineer, was already running diagnostics. The drive is fried. Whatever that tunnel was, it burned out half our systems. We're not going anywhere fast. Jake took a deep breath and straightened his uniform. This was first contact. Actual first contact with an alien species. Humanity had been searching for other intelligent life for centuries, and now they had found it by accident. Or maybe the aliens had found them. Amy, see if you can establish communication. Use every frequency we have. Ben, get life support stable. Everyone else, look sharp but don't touch any weapons. We don't want to start a war on our first day meeting aliens. Amy's fingers flew over her console. She broadcast greetings in every human language, then tried mathematical sequences, then just about everything else she could think of. For a long minute, nothing happened. Then one of the huge alien ships moved closer, and a voice filled the bridge. The language was nothing like anything on Earth. It sounded like wind moving through pipes mixed with clicks and hums. But then something changed, and the voice switched to perfect English. Unidentified vessel, you have entered Thessian Empire space without authorization. Identify yourself immediately or be disabled. Jake exchanged glances with Amy. The alien voice was stern but not hostile. That was a good sign. This is Captain Jake Martinez of the Earth vessel Aurora. We come in peace. We didn't mean to enter your space. We were testing a new drive system and got pulled into some kind of tunnel. We're explorers, not invaders. There was a pause. Jake could imagine the aliens on the other end trying to figure out what to make of humans. Earth is not in our records, the voice said. You claim to be explorers, yet you appear in the heart of our empire's territory. Explain how this is possible. Amy leaned over to Jake and whispered, Heart of their territory? How far did that tunnel take us? Jake shook his head. He had no idea. We don't have a good explanation, he said honestly to the aliens. We were in our own section of space, far from any known civilization. The tunnel appeared and pulled us in. We're as surprised as you are. Another pause. Then a different voice came through, this one deeper and calmer. I am High Coordinator Velshara of the Thessian Empire. Your story is unusual, but our scans indicate you are telling the truth. You are clearly not from any known species. We will escort you to Thessara Prime, our capital world, where proper first contact protocols can be followed. Do not attempt to flee or resist. Consider this an invitation, not a threat. Jake felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. At least they weren't shooting first and asking questions later. We accept your invitation, High Coordinator. Thank you for your understanding. Do not thank me yet, Captain Martinez. You have many questions to answer. The alien ships formed up around the Aurora, and they began moving as a group. Through the view screen, Jake could see they were approaching a star system with multiple planets. One of them was massive, nearly twice the size of Earth, with rings that sparkled in the light of 3 suns. That's the Thessara Prime, Amy said, reading from her console. I'm getting data feeds now. The Thessians are sending us information about their world. Captain, this empire spans 47 star systems. They've been in space for over 10,000 years. 10,000 years. Jake tried to wrap his mind around that number. Human civilization had only been flying in space for a few centuries. And here was an empire that had been doing it since before humans had invented writing. What else can you tell me about them? Jake asked. Amy scrolled through the data. They're reptilian, from what I can see in these images. Cold-blooded but technologically advanced. Their government is centralized but includes multiple other species. They call themselves the Galactic Council. There are at least 6 different intelligent species in this empire. Ben looked up from his repairs. Captain, you need to see this. I'm analyzing the scans they did of our ship. Their technology is incredible. They can see right through our hull, map every system, probably count how many people we have on board. But you know what's weird? What? Jake asked. They're computer systems. From what I can see in these data packets they're sending, they're running on something ancient, like really ancient. The code structure is clunky. I think our systems might actually be more advanced in some ways, even though their ships are way bigger. That was interesting, but Jake didn't have time to think about it. The Aurora was being guided into orbit around Thessara Prime, and he could see a massive space station ahead. It was the size of a small city, all curves and glowing blue lights. "We're being directed to a docking bay," Amy reported. "High Coordinator Velshara will meet us personally." "Captain, this is huge. We're making history." Jake stood up and straightened his uniform again. "All right, people. We're representing all of humanity here. Be polite, be respectful, and for the love of everything, don't touch anything that looks important. Amy, Ben, Ryan, you're with me. The rest of the crew stays on the Aurora and keeps things running." Ryan Foster, the ship's liaison officer, grabbed his datapad. He was the most organized person on the crew, always prepared for anything. "Should I bring the formal first contact guidelines?" "Bring everything," Jake said. "We're making this up as we go." The Aurora docked with a soft thump. Through the airlock window, Jake could see aliens waiting for them. The Thessians were tall, maybe 7 feet on average, with scaled skin in shades of green and blue. They wore robes that looked official and important. Their faces were long and narrow, with large eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The airlock opened. Jake stepped through, followed by his team. A particularly tall Thessian moved forward, her scales a deep emerald color. She wore a more elaborate robe than the others, with symbols that probably meant something important. "Captain Martinez," she said in that same perfectly pronounced English. "I am High Coordinator Velshara. Welcome to Thessara Prime. You are the first of your species we have ever encountered. This is a momentous occasion." Jake extended his hand, then realized the Thessian might not know what a handshake was. But Velshara looked at his hand, seemed to understand, and placed her own hand in his. Her skin was cool and dry, the scales smooth. "Thank you for receiving us, High Coordinator. We're honored to meet you and your people." Velshara made a gesture, and the other Thessians relaxed slightly. "Come, we have much to discuss. The Galactic Council wishes to meet you, and there are many formalities to complete. But first you must be tired and confused. We have prepared quarters for you." As they walked through the station, Jake couldn't help but notice everything around him. The technology was impressive, sure, but there was something off about it. Everything seemed overcomplicated. There were Thessians standing at stations, manually entering data into systems that should have been automated. Lines of aliens waited at checkpoints, going through what looked like endless verification procedures. Ben noticed it too. Jake saw his engineer's eyes narrowing as he watched a maintenance crew working on a power conduit, using tools that looked like they belonged in a museum. They reached a large chamber, where more Thessians waited. These ones looked even more official, if that was possible. Velshara gestured for the humans to stand in the center. "Members of the Council," she said, "I present Captain Jake Martinez and his crew from the planet Earth. They have stumbled into our empire through means we do not yet understand. I propose we extend them hospitality and learn more about their species." An older Thessian, his scales faded to almost gray, spoke up. "This is highly irregular. We have protocols for first contact, and none of them involve unknown species appearing in our capital system. Which is precisely why this is interesting." "Councilmember Zekthar," Velshara replied. "We should embrace this opportunity." Jake cleared his throat. All eyes turned to him. "If I may say something, High Coordinator?" Velshara nodded. "We're grateful for your hospitality. We don't mean to cause any problems. We're explorers and we're excited to learn about your civilization, but I have to ask, that docking procedure we just went through, it took about 45 minutes and involved 17 different checkpoints. Back home. The diplomatic corps is similar," Amy added. "Everything requires formal meetings with specific protocols. They've never heard of an informal conversation. I suggested they might resolve disputes faster with casual discussions over coffee, and they asked me what coffee was." "They don't have coffee?" Ben looked genuinely upset by this. "They have something similar, but they only drink." The diplomatic quarters assigned to the human crew were impressive. High ceilings, windows that looked out over the capital city below, furniture that adjusted itself to human proportions once they sat down. But getting there had taken 3 hours of paperwork, verification, bioscans, and approvals from at least a dozen different Thessian departments. Jake sat on what passed for a couch and rubbed his temples. Did we really need to fill out forms just to get bedsheets? Ryan Foster was already organizing the mountain of documents the Thessians had given them. He was in his element, sorting through bureaucratic chaos. Apparently, each item in these quarters requires individual authorization. The sheets are classified as comfort items, Category 7, Subsection B. They need approval from the Housing Allocation Committee. There's a committee for sheets? Ben asked from where he was examining the room's control panel. That's insane. Look at this. To adjust the temperature, you have to go through a menu with 43 options. Why not just have a dial? Amy was reading through a data pad the Thessians had provided. It contained information about their civilization, customs, and laws. She had been reading for an hour and was only on page 12 of what appeared to be several thousand pages. I think I'm starting to understand how their society works. Everything is about tradition and protocol. They've been doing things the same way for thousands of years. That's not necessarily bad, Jake said, though he didn't sound convinced. Stability has its benefits. Sure, but there's stability and then there's this. Amy gestured at the datapad. Did you know they have a formal greeting ceremony that takes 3 days? We're scheduled to go through it starting tomorrow. 3 full days of reciting titles and performing rituals. Ben had gotten the control panel open and was looking inside. Captain, you need to see this. Their computer systems are running on what's basically ancient hardware. This station is massive, probably holds thousands of people, and it's running on processing power that we'd consider outdated 50 years ago. Maybe they have reasons we don't understand, Jake said. Let's not judge too quickly. A chime sounded at the door. When Jake opened it, he found a young Thessian standing there, scales a bright green that suggested youth. The alien bowed formally. Captain Martinez, I am Krivek, assigned as your cultural liaison. I will help you understand our ways and ensure you do not accidentally offend anyone during your stay. Thank you, Krivek. Please come in. The young Thessian entered and immediately noticed Ben with the control panel open. His eyes widened in what might have been alarm. You should not tamper with station systems without proper authorization. There are forms to fill out for maintenance requests. I wasn't tampering, Ben said quickly. Just looking. Sorry if that's a problem. Krivek seemed uncertain how to respond. It is not a problem exactly. It is simply not done. If you need adjustments, you submit a request to the Environmental Control Committee. They review it within 7 business days, and if approved, a certified technician makes the adjustment. 7 days just to change the temperature? Ben couldn't hide his disbelief. It ensures everything is done correctly and safely. Jake decided to change the subject before Ben started lecturing about efficiency. Krivek, can you tell us about tomorrow's ceremony? Amy says it takes 3 days. The young Thessian brightened. Oh yes, the formal introduction ceremony. It is a great honor. You will meet all 73 members of the High Council individually. Each meeting follows a specific protocol. First, you exchange formal greetings, which have been written out for you. Then you discuss your species' history and accomplishments. Then you participate in the traditional sharing of credentials. Finally, you conclude with ceremonial farewells. And this happens 73 times? Amy asked weakly. Yes. Each council member represents a different sector or species group. It would be disrespectful to meet them as a group. Protocol demands individual attention. Ryan was calculating. If each meeting takes 2 hours, that's 146 hours. That's more than 3 days. Oh, some meetings take longer, Krivek said helpfully, especially with the elder council members. They enjoy lengthy discussions of historical precedent. But do not worry. We have scheduled breaks for rest and meals. Those are only 1 hour each. Jake looked at his crew. They all wore the same expression of barely concealed horror. But there was nothing to be done about it. This was the Thessians' home and humans were guests. The next day, the ceremony began. Council member Zekthar was first. He was the gray-scaled Thessian who had questioned their presence the day before. They met in a formal chamber decorated with what looked like historical artifacts. Zekthar began by reciting his own credentials, which took 20 minutes. Then he asked Jake to do the same. Jake tried to summarize his career and humanity's space exploration history, but Zekthar kept interrupting to ask for clarifications and additional details. 2 hours turned into 3. So your species achieved faster than light travel only recently? Zekthar asked. We have been traveling between stars for 9,000 years. That's impressive, Jake said honestly. Your civilization has incredible longevity. It is because we respect tradition and do not rush into change. Every decision is carefully considered. Every protocol exists for a reason. Amy, who was sitting beside Jake, spoke up. May I ask a question, council member? Zekthar nodded permission. When you make decisions about new technology or policies, how long does that process usually take? It depends on the complexity. Simple matters might be resolved in a few years. Major decisions can take decades. We once spent 43 years debating whether to adjust our trade routes. It was important to consider every possible consequence. 43 years? Amy tried to keep her voice neutral. And during that time, the old trade routes stayed in place? Of course. We do not change things hastily. Jake saw Amy's mind working. She was a diplomat, trained to understand different cultures. But he could tell this was challenging even for her. The meetings continued. Council member after council member, each with their own rituals and requirements. Some were friendlier than others. A few seemed genuinely curious about humans. Most were simply following the protocol because that was what had always been done. On the second day, Jake met with High Coordinator Velshara again. She seemed different in this formal setting, more reserved. But halfway through their scheduled meeting, she did something unexpected. She dismissed the attendants and spoke more casually. "You may speak freely here, Captain. This room is not recorded." Jake relaxed slightly. "Thank you, High Coordinator. Can I ask you something? Please." "Yesterday when I mentioned streamlining your docking procedures, everyone looked shocked. Was that offensive?" Velshara made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Not offensive, no. Surprising. You see, Captain, no one questions our procedures. They have been in place for thousands of years. They are simply the way things are done. But has anyone ever asked if they could be done better? What is better? Our procedures work. They have always worked. Why change them?" Jake chose his words carefully. "Because sometimes there are more efficient ways to accomplish the same goal. Ways that save time and resources. Ways that might let you do more with what you have." Velshara was quiet for a moment. "When I was young, I had similar thoughts. I wondered why we did things in such complicated ways. But I learned that our complexity ensures accuracy and safety. Every step in our procedures catches potential problems. But you could catch those problems with simpler systems," Jake said. "My engineer Ben could probably design a docking system that's both simpler and safer than what you have now. Your engineer is very confident. He's very good. All of my crew are. We're explorers, High Coordinator. We have to be adaptable. We can't spend 43 years debating trade routes. Sometimes we have minutes to make decisions that affect people's lives. So we've learned to think quickly and act efficiently." Velshara studied him with those large, intelligent eyes. "You are a young species. Perhaps that is why you feel the need for speed. Maybe. Or maybe being young means we haven't gotten stuck in our ways yet." That evening, back in their quarters, the crew gathered to share their experiences. Everyone was exhausted from the endless formalities. "I met with the head of their engineering department," Ben said. "Nice guy. Brilliant, actually. But he showed me their maintenance procedures for a standard power conduit, and it's insane. 27 steps, each requiring sign-off from a supervisor. I asked him why, and he said it was to prevent accidents. I pointed out that a simple safety interlock would do the same thing automatically, and he looked at me like I'd suggested magic." Ryan had spent time with the administrative staff. Their filing system is a nightmare. They've been adding layers of organization for centuries without ever stepping back to redesign the whole thing. I found records that had been misfiled for decades because no one knew which of the 17 different categorization systems to use. Ben Crawford stood in the main engineering bay of Thesara Prime's orbital station and tried not to cry. The space was enormous, filled with sophisticated equipment and staffed by dozens of skilled Thessian engineers. But they were doing everything the hard way. "Explain this to me again," he said to Chief Engineer Torval, a stocky Thessian with dark blue scales. "You wait for systems to completely fail before you fix them?" Torval nodded. "Yes. When a system fails, we follow the diagnostic protocols, identify the problem, order replacement parts, schedule the repair, and complete the fix. The process typically takes 3 to 4 weeks, but by then other systems might have failed because of the first failure. Sometimes, yes. Then we repair those as well." Ben pinched the bridge of his nose. "What if I told you that you could predict failures before they happen? You could fix small problems before they became big ones. We call it preventive maintenance." Torval looked skeptical. "How would we predict a failure that has not occurred?" "By monitoring system performance, looking for warning signs. A power coupling doesn't just suddenly fail. It degrades over time. You can measure that degradation and replace the coupling before it breaks. But the coupling is not broken yet. Why would we replace something that still functions? Because it's cheaper and easier to replace a coupling during scheduled maintenance than to shut down an entire deck when it explodes at 3 in the morning. Torval was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Show me." Ben smiled. This was exactly what he had hoped for. He pulled up the station's power grid on a display. "Look at this coupling here in Section 7. See these fluctuations in the energy output? That's a sign of degradation. In about 2 weeks, maybe 3, this coupling is going to fail. But if you replace it now during a routine maintenance window, you avoid the emergency and the downtime. How do you know it will fail in 2 weeks? Experience and math. We've seen these patterns thousands of times. Once you know what to look for, it's obvious." Torval studied the display. "This is remarkable. We could avoid many emergency repairs with this knowledge. That's just the start. You could set up automated monitoring systems that track all your critical components and alert you when something needs attention. Instead of having engineers constantly checking things manually, the computer does it for you. But the protocols require manual inspections. It is how we ensure accuracy. Your manual inspections miss things because engineers can't check everything all the time. Computers never get tired or distracted. Let them do the boring work, and your engineers can focus on the complicated problems." Meanwhile, across the station, Amy Cooper was having a similar conversation with the Thessian diplomatic corps. She sat in an elegant conference room with 5 Thessian diplomats, including a young one named Lisa Hayes who seemed particularly interested in human methods. "Let me make sure I understand," Amy said. "When you have a dispute between 2 colonies, you schedule formal mediation sessions. Each session is 3 hours long and follows a strict protocol. You might have 20 or 30 sessions before reaching a resolution." The senior diplomat, a dignified Thessian named Mortaka, nodded. "Correct. It ensures all perspectives are heard and all precedents are considered. But what if the dispute is time-sensitive? What if waiting months for a resolution causes real problems? Then the parties must endure those problems while following proper procedure. To rush would risk an incorrect resolution." Amy leaned forward. "What if I told you that you could resolve most disputes much faster without sacrificing quality? You could have a conversation, understand both sides, find common ground, and reach an agreement in a single meeting." The Thessian diplomats looked at each other uncertainly. Lisa Hayes spoke up. "How would that work? Without the formal structure, how would we ensure fairness? By being flexible. Look, formal protocols have their place, but sometimes you need to just talk to people, have an informal discussion, maybe over a meal, maybe while taking a walk. You'd be surprised how much you can accomplish when people aren't reading from prepared statements." "That sounds chaotic," Mortaka said. "It sounds efficient," Lisa countered, earning a sharp look from her superior. Amy saw an opportunity. "Lisa, what if we did a test? Pick a current dispute, something minor. Let me try to resolve it using human diplomatic methods. If I fail, we forget the whole thing. If I succeed, you consider that maybe there's something to learn here." Lisa looked at Mortaka. The older diplomat frowned, but eventually said, "There is a minor trade disagreement between 2 merchant guilds. They have been in mediation for 6 months. If you can resolve it faster, I will listen to your methods," Amy smiled. "Give me 3 days." In the administrative offices, Ryan Foster was performing what he called an efficiency audit, though the Thessians just thought he was learning their systems. He sat with a senior administrator named Beltoran, who was showing him how they processed requests for resource allocation. "So a colony puts in a request for additional water purification units," Ryan said, following along. "The request goes to the resource committee. They review it and send it to the technical assessment department. That department evaluates feasibility and sends it back to the resource committee with recommendations. The committee votes, and if approved, it goes to the logistics office for scheduling. From there it goes to the manufacturing authority, then to transportation services, then finally to the colony. Yes, it typically takes 4 to 6 months. What happens if the colony needs the purification units urgently? What if their current units are failing? Then they should have requested new units earlier. Planning ahead prevents emergencies." Ryan bit back his first response and tried a different approach. "But what if something unexpected happens? Equipment fails sooner than predicted. A natural disaster damages infrastructure. You can't always plan for everything, which is why we have emergency protocols. Those requests are processed in only 2 months. 2 months is still a long time when people don't have clean water." Beltoran shifted uncomfortably. "The system ensures careful allocation of resources. If we rushed every request, we might make poor decisions." Ryan pulled out his datapad and showed Beltorin a simplified flowchart he had created. What if you eliminated some redundant steps? The Technical Assessment Department and the Resource Committee are essentially doing the same evaluation. Combine them. And instead of sending requests back and forth, have all the necessary parties review simultaneously. You could cut your process down to 2 weeks instead of 6 months. Beltorin stared at the flowchart. This is very different from how we have always done things. But would it work? I do not know, perhaps. But implementing such changes would require approval from many departments. The process to change the process would itself take years. Ryan laughed, though there was no humor in it. Of course it would. That's the problem, isn't it? You're stuck because changing anything requires going through the same slow systems that need to be changed. Across the station, Kate Morgan was working with the Drexian security forces. The Drexians were a warrior species, proud and strong, with rigid codes of honor. Their training facility was impressive and their soldiers were disciplined and skilled. But their tactics were entirely predictable. Kate watched a squad run through a combat simulation. They moved in perfect formation, each soldier in their assigned position executing maneuvers that had clearly been practiced thousands of times. The simulation ended with the squad completing their objective, but Kate had counted at least 3 moments where the enemy could have exploited their predictability. That was excellent, said squad leader Dextara, a massive Drexian with scars across his armor. The squad performed flawlessly. They followed the plan perfectly, Kate agreed. But what happens when the enemy doesn't do what you expect? We have contingency protocols for various scenarios. Show me. The squad ran the simulation again, but this time Kate changed the parameters. The enemy attacked from an unexpected angle. The Drexian squad hesitated, unsure which protocol to follow, and failed the mission. Dextara was frustrated. The enemy should not attack from that angle. It violates tactical logic. The enemy doesn't care about your tactical logic. They want to win, so they'll do whatever works, even if it's unexpected. How would you handle such a situation? Dextara asked, his tone challenging. Kate smiled. Mind if I show you? She reset the simulation and took command of the squad. When the enemy attacked from the unexpected angle, she immediately broke formation. Instead of following a prescribed response, she adapted on the fly. 2 soldiers provided covering fire while 3 flanked the enemy position. 1 soldier grabbed high ground for overwatch. It was messy and improvised, but the squad completed the objective in half the time. Dextara stared at the results. That was chaotic, undisciplined. That was flexible. Your soldiers are well trained. They don't need rigid formations. Give them basic principles and let them think for themselves. But without structure, how do we maintain order? You maintain purpose. Everyone knows the mission. Everyone understands their role. But they're free to adapt when situations change. Trust your soldiers, Dextara. They're smart enough to handle it. Over the following weeks, word spread about what the humans were doing. Some Thessians were intrigued. The Aurora launched from Thessara Prime 6 hours after accepting the challenge. That alone caused a stir among the Thessians, who would have needed 3 days just to complete the departure paperwork. Jake simply filed a flight plan and left, figuring they could apologize for the bureaucratic shortcut later. The crew was expanded for this mission. Torval joined them, eager to see human engineering methods in action. Lisa Hayes came as diplomatic liaison, and Krivek volunteered as well, unable to resist the chance for adventure. Even Dextara insisted on coming, bringing 2 of his Drexian soldiers who had taken to Kate's training style. Time to target is 4 days at maximum speed, Amy reported from navigation. That gives us 1 day to fix whatever's wrong with Thessara 7. No pressure, Ben muttered, already reviewing technical specifications for the colony's atmospheric processors. Jake gathered everyone in the main briefing room. Humans, Thessians, and Drexians crowded together, a mix of species that had never worked like this before. All right, people. Here's the situation. Thessara 7 has 3 atmospheric processors that maintain breathable air across the colony. 2 are already down and the 3rd is failing. Once it goes, the colonists have maybe 48 hours before air quality becomes dangerous. After that, they start dying. Lisa Hayes raised her hand nervously. How many colonists? About 8,000. Mostly Thessian, some Kilnari, a few Drexians. We need to stabilize the processors and give the colony time to implement permanent repairs. Torval studied the technical readouts. These processors are old models. They should have been replaced decades ago, but the colony likely requested new ones and is still waiting for approval. Probably, Jake agreed, but that's not our problem right now. Our problem is fixing what they have. Ben, what do you need? A team of engineers who can think on their feet. We won't have time for proper diagnostics or careful protocols. We'll have to jury-rig solutions with whatever materials are on hand. Torval looked uncomfortable. Jury-rig? What does that mean? Make it work with what you have, even if it's not by the book. Can you do that? The Thessian engineer hesitated, then nodded. I will try. Kate, we'll need to evacuate population centers near the failing processor in case it goes critical. Can you work with Dextara on that? Kate nodded. We'll organize the colonists and move them to safer areas. Quick and efficient. Dextara stood straighter. My soldiers are ready. Amy, you handle communication with the colony governor. Lisa, you help her cut through whatever red tape might slow us down. Ryan, your logistics. Figure out what supplies the colony has on hand and what we can bring from the Aurora. Everyone scattered to their tasks. Jake stood alone in the briefing room for a moment, wondering if he had just promised something impossible. 5 days to save a colony. The Thessians would have taken 3 months and probably succeeded through careful planning and proper procedure. But they didn't have 3 months. The Aurora arrived at Thessera 7 on schedule. The colony looked rough even from orbit. It was built in a crater on a hostile moon, domes and tunnels spreading out from a central hub. The atmosphere outside was toxic, which made the failing processors a death sentence. Amy opened communication with the colony. This is the Aurora, sent by High Coordinator Velshera to assist with your atmospheric crisis. We're here to help. The response came from a tired-sounding Thessian. This is Governor Pelvoron. Thank the Council you're here. Our third processor is failing faster than we predicted. We have maybe 36 hours left. We're on our way down. Prepare your technical team for our arrival. And Governor, we're going to do things fast and probably not by the book. We need you to trust us. There was a pause. At this point, I'll try anything. The docking bay is ready for you. The Aurora landed and the team rushed out. Governor Pelvoron met them. Scales dulled from stress and lack of sleep. The main processor is in the eastern sector. Our engineers have been trying to stabilize it, but nothing is working. Ben was already running with his tools. Take me there now. The processor room was a disaster. Alarms blared. Displays showed critical warnings in red, and 3 exhausted Thessian engineers stood around looking helpless. The machinery was ancient, held together with patches and temporary fixes from decades of deferred maintenance. Okay, Ben said, surveying the situation. First thing, we shut off these alarms. Can't think with all that noise. One of the local engineers looked horrified. But the alarms indicate critical problems. I can see the critical problems. The alarms are just making it harder to fix them. Ben found the control panel and silenced the blaring sirens. The sudden quiet was startling. Torval arrived with more equipment. He stared at the processor and said softly, "This should have been replaced years ago. But it wasn't, so we work with what we have. Torval, check the power couplings. I bet half of them are degraded. Local engineers, show me your spare parts inventory." The Thessian engineers led Ben to a storage room. It was mostly empty. Years of requesting new parts through proper channels had left them with almost nothing. "All right," Ben said, thinking fast. "We can't fix this with spare parts we don't have. We need to get creative. What else does this colony have? Any manufacturing facilities? Fabrication equipment? We have a small fabrication shop for basic repairs." "Show me." While Ben worked on the engineering problem, Kate and Dextera were organizing evacuations. The population centers nearest the failing processor needed to be cleared in case of catastrophic failure. "We need to move 5,000 people to the western sectors," Kate explained to Dextera. "We have 6 hours. Following standard evacuation protocols, that would require at least 12 hours. Then we don't follow standard protocols. We organize people into groups, assign each group a route, and move them all simultaneously. Your soldiers lead the way, ensure no one gets lost or left behind." Dextera considered this. It was chaotic and violated every regulation about orderly evacuations. But it might work. "Very well. My soldiers will guide them." The evacuation began. It was messy. People were confused and scared. But the Drexian soldiers, trained by Kate to be flexible, adapted to the situation. They helped elderly colonists, carried children, redirected groups when routes became crowded. Within 4 hours, the dangerous sectors were clear. Governor Pelveran watched in amazement. That should not have been possible. It was possible because your people trusted the process, Kate said, and because Dextara's soldiers didn't stick to rigid formations. They reacted to what was needed in the moment. Meanwhile, Amy and Lisa were in the governor's office trying to coordinate the overall response. The problem was that the colony was still trying to follow official procedures even in a crisis. Governor, we need authorization to access your emergency supplies, Amy said. I must file a request with the Planetary Resources Committee. They will review it and grant access within 3 business days. We don't have 3 days. We need those supplies now. Pelveran looked pained. I cannot simply ignore proper authorization procedures, Lisa spoke up quietly. Governor, High Coordinator Velshara sent these humans specifically because they do things differently. Perhaps in this case, we should follow their lead. Pelveran looked between the 2 young diplomats. Then he made a decision that went against everything he had been trained to do. Access granted. Take what you need, Amy smiled. Thank you, Governor. I promise we'll make sure the paperwork is filed correctly after we save your colony. Down in the processor room, Ben had been working for 12 straight hours. He had fabricated replacement parts using the colony's limited equipment, rerouted power through systems never designed for that purpose, and bypassed safety protocols that would have shut everything down. It was the engineering equivalent of duct tape and prayers, but it was holding. This is not up to code, Torvald said, watching Ben wire together components in ways that violated a dozen regulations. Code assumes you have proper parts and time to do things right. We have neither. This will work for now, and that's what matters. But the safety margins are so thin, any fluctuation could cause problems. Then we'll monitor for fluctuations and adjust as needed. That's why we're implementing active monitoring instead of just setting it and forgetting it. Torvald understood. Preventive maintenance. Like you showed me on the station. Exactly. We can't prevent this crisis because it already happened, but we can prevent the next one by watching for warning signs. Hour 18 arrived. The processor was stabilized, but barely. It was running at 70% capacity, enough to keep the colony safe if the other 2 processors could be brought back online. Tell me about the other processors, Ben said to the local engineers. They failed due to cascading power surges. Standard repair procedure would be to replace all the damaged components. But we don't have those components. Can the damage be bypassed? Isolate the broken parts and reroute around them? The local engineers looked at each other. That is not how we were trained. I'll show you how. Ben took his team to the second processor. It looked even worse than the first, burned out and blackened from the power surge. But the core systems were intact. Everything else was just connections and control circuits. We don't need this to run at full capacity, Ben explained. We just need it to work. So we disconnect the damaged control boards, wire the core directly to manual controls, and the emergency council session was called 3 days after the Aurora returned from Thesera 7. The grand chamber was packed with council members, observers, and what seemed like half the station's population watching from viewing galleries. Jake and his crew sat in the center, feeling like they were on trial. Council member Hackstrel stood, his faded scales catching the light. His voice was strong despite his age. I call this session to address the growing chaos that these humans have brought to our empire. In just 2 months, they have disrupted centuries of tradition, encouraged our young people to question authority, and spread dangerous ideas about efficiency and improvisation. They also saved 8,000 lives. Velshara countered calmly, something our standard procedures would have failed to do in time. 1. Success does not justify abandoning everything that has kept this empire stable for 10,000 years. Hacksteral gestured toward Jake and his crew. These humans are reckless. They ignore safety protocols, bypass proper authorization, and teach our people to do the same. What happens when someone gets hurt because they took a shortcut? What happens when a quick fix causes a bigger problem down the line? Jake stood up. May I speak, council member? Hacksteral nodded stiffly. You're right to be concerned about safety. Shortcuts can be dangerous if done carelessly, but there's a difference between reckless shortcuts and smart efficiency. We don't ignore safety. We just don't add unnecessary steps that slow everything down without actually making things safer. And who decides which steps are unnecessary? Hacksteral demanded. You? Outsiders who have been in our empire for mere weeks? We have protocols for a reason. Every step was added because of a past failure, a lesson learned through painful experience. I understand that, Jake said, but some of those lessons might be outdated. Technology changes. Situations change. A protocol that made sense 1,000 years ago might not be the best solution today. A younger council member, Zekthar, spoke up. The humans make a valid point. We have added layer upon layer of procedure without ever removing the old ones. Perhaps it is time to evaluate what we actually need versus what we simply do out of habit. Habit is not a weakness, Hexterl snapped. Habit is consistency, reliability. Our empire has lasted this long precisely because we do not chase every new idea that comes along. And how long has it been since we had a new idea of our own? Zekthar challenged. Our last major innovation was 300 years ago. We have become a civilization of maintenance, not creation. The chamber erupted in debate. Some council members agreed with Hexterl, fearing that change would lead to instability. Others sided with Zekthar, frustrated by the empire's stagnation. Felshara called for order multiple times before the arguing finally subsided. This debate will not be resolved today, she said, but we must make a decision about the humans and their influence. I propose a compromise. We establish a formal program, the Human Integration Initiative, where human methods are tested and evaluated before wider adoption. The humans serve as advisors, teaching their approaches to willing volunteers. Nothing is forced. Nothing is mandatory. But those who wish to learn are free to do so. And if these experiments fail? Hexterl asked. If someone gets hurt or systems fail because of human methods? Then we learn from those failures just as we learned from past mistakes, Felshara replied. We are not children who need to be protected from every risk. We are an advanced civilization capable of evaluating new information and making informed decisions. The council voted. It was close, but the compromise passed. The Human Integration Initiative was officially established. Jake and his crew would stay as permanent advisors, teaching their methods to anyone who wanted to learn. But not everyone was happy with this decision. Over the following weeks, resistance began to organize. Conservative Thessians, led by Hexterl, formed what they called the Preservation Movement. They argued for maintaining traditional values and warned against the dangers of rapid change. They held rallies, published documents explaining why the old ways were better, and pressured young Thessians to reject human influence. Meanwhile, younger members of the Empire embraced the changes enthusiastically. Krivek, Lisa Hayes, and Vectra from the Thessera 7 colony became the face of what they called the Progressive Circle. They argued that the Empire had stagnated and needed fresh thinking to survive in a changing galaxy. This is what I was afraid of, Jake said one evening, watching news coverage of protests from both groups. We've started a civil conflict. Amy was more philosophical. Change is always uncomfortable. But look at what's really happening. For the first time in centuries, Thessians are debating their future instead of just accepting it. That's healthy. Is it healthy if it tears their society apart? Their society was already fractured. We just made the cracks visible. Ben walked in with Torval, both looking excited. Captain, you need to see this. We've been working with the Engineering Guild, and they want to redesign the entire maintenance program for the Empire's fleet, based on preventive maintenance principles. That's a huge undertaking, Jake said. It is, Torval agreed, but the fleet admirals are interested. They have seen the results at Thessera 7 and want similar improvements for their ships, though some of the older admirals are resistant. Of course they are, Jake muttered. Ryan and Beltoran arrived next, carrying datapads filled with proposals. We've streamlined 17 different administrative processes, Ryan reported. Response times are down by 60%, but we're getting pushback from the preservation movement. They're filing formal complaints about every change. Let them, Beltoran said, surprising everyone. The once cautious administrator had become one of the humans' strongest supporters. The results speak for themselves. Our department is more efficient than ever and nothing has broken. The critics have no evidence, only fear. Lisa Hayes came by with news from the diplomatic corps. Amy, the training program you developed is exceeding expectations. We've resolved disputes in days that would have taken months, but Council Member Hexterl is pressuring the corps leadership to shut it down. On what grounds? Amy asked. He claims we are abandoning the dignity of proper diplomatic protocol. That's ridiculous. We're not abandoning anything. We're just adding new tools to what already exists. Try telling that to someone who sees any change as a threat, Lisa said sadly. The tension in the Empire continued to build. The progressive circle grew larger, especially among younger Thessians and members of other species who had also felt constrained by rigid traditions. The preservation movement remained strong among older members of society, and those in positions of authority who feared losing control. Then something happened that put everything in perspective. A distress call came from the Empire's frontier. An unknown alien species had attacked a Thessian patrol fleet. The aliens were aggressive and used tactics unlike anything the Empire had encountered before. Admiral Vorkon, a traditional Thessian military commander, led the response fleet. He followed standard military doctrine, deploying his ships in textbook formations and executing maneuvers from the tactical manual. The unknown aliens tore through his formations, exploiting their predictability. The fleet was losing badly when Vorkon made a desperate decision. He contacted Kate Morgan. "Commander Morgan, I need your help. Nothing I try is working. These aliens adapt to every standard tactic. I need something they cannot predict." Kate was in the middle of a training session when the call came through. "Admiral, I can advise, but you need to be willing to abandon the manual." "Can you do that?" There was a long pause. Then Vorkon said, "Tell me what to do." Kate talked the Admiral through a series of unconventional maneuvers. Split the fleet into smaller, independent groups. Have them attack from multiple angles simultaneously instead of in coordinated waves. Use unpredictable timing. Make the enemy respond to chaos instead of order. Vorkon was uncomfortable with every suggestion, but he was also watching his ships get destroyed. He gave the orders. His officers were confused and hesitant, but they obeyed. The battle turned. The unknown aliens, expecting predictable Thessian tactics, were suddenly facing attacks from everywhere at once, with no discernible pattern. They tried to adapt, but human-inspired tactics were fundamentally different from what they had faced before. The alien fleet retreated and the Thessian ships survived. Vorkon returned to Thessara Prime shaken but alive. He requested an immediate meeting with the Galactic Council, and Jake was summoned to attend. "I am alive because of human tactics," Vorkon told the assembled council. "My training told me to maintain formation, follow doctrine, execute by the manual. All of that would have gotten my entire fleet destroyed. Commander Morgan showed me that adaptability is not weakness. It is strength." Haxtrel stood up. "One battle does not prove that abandoning all discipline is wise." "I did not abandon discipline," Vorkon replied sharply. "My fleet followed orders. We maintained structure, but we also adapted to the situation in real time. That is what humans do naturally, and it is what we must learn." The Admiral's testimony had impact. Seeing a respected military leader endorse human methods made many Thessians reconsider their positions. The debate shifted from whether change was needed to how much change was appropriate. 1 year after the Aurora stumbled through that glowing tunnel, Jake Martinez stood in the same docking bay where he had first met High Coordinator Velshara. But everything had changed. The docking procedure that once took 45 minutes now took 12. The 17 checkpoints had been reduced to 5. The changes were subtle but significant, small improvements that added up to something larger. Earth had officially joined the Thessian Galactic Empire 6 months ago. It had not been a smooth transition. There had been protests, arguments, and moments when Jake wondered if the whole thing would collapse. But slowly, carefully, the two civilizations had begun to merge their approaches into something neither had imagined before. Ben Crawford walked through the engineering section of the station, now officially titled Chief Integration Engineer. The title was awkward, but the job was everything he loved. Around him, Thessian engineers worked alongside human ones, teaching each other their methods. Some days it was frustrating. The Thessians still wanted to fill out forms for everything, and the humans still wanted to just fix things and worry about paperwork later. But they were learning to meet in the middle. Torval approached with a datapad. The Thessian engineer had become Ben's closest friend, despite their very different approaches to problem-solving. "Ben, look at this. The fleet maintenance program has reduced emergency repairs by 70%. 70%. That's what happens when you fix things before they break," Ben said with a grin. "Yes, but more than that. We have also found that combining preventive monitoring with proper documentation creates better long-term data. We can now predict failure patterns years in advance." Your way is faster, but adding our way makes it more sustainable. Ben nodded. That was the real lesson they had all learned. Neither approach was perfect alone. Human speed and creativity combined with Thessian patience and thoroughness created something better than either. How's Vectra doing? Ben asked. Excellent. She has taken your training and developed a whole new curriculum for young engineers. She teaches both methods, human and Thessian, and lets students decide which approach fits each situation best. In the diplomatic wing, Amy Cooper was finishing a negotiation between two colonies that had been in dispute for years. Beside her sat Lisa Hayes, now a full diplomat in her own right. They had developed a hybrid style that impressed everyone. They started with informal discussions over tea, using human relationship building techniques. Then they formalized agreements using traditional Thessian protocols, ensuring everything was properly documented and honored. I think we have a solution both sides can accept, Amy said to the representatives. You each give up something, but you also each gain something more valuable. The representatives, one Thessian and one Chilnari, looked at each other. 6 months ago, they would have still been scheduling their first formal mediation session. Now, after 3 days of Amy and Lisa's methods, they were shaking hands. After the meeting, Lisa pulled Amy aside. Councilmember Haxterrell has requested a meeting with you. Privately. Amy raised an eyebrow. Haxterrell had been the loudest critic of human influence. He had voted against Earth's membership and continued to speak out against rapid change. A private meeting was unexpected. She met him in his office, a traditional space filled with historical artifacts and old texts. Haxterrell gestured for her to sit. Diplomat Cooper, he began formally. I owe you an apology. Amy blinked in surprise. You do? I have spent this past year fighting against everything you and your people represent. I believed you were destroying our civilization, corrupting our values, leading us toward chaos. He paused, looking tired, but I have been watching the results. The data does not lie. Response times are better, problems are solved faster, and most importantly, our young people are excited about the future again. I had not realized how much we had lost that. Council member, we never wanted to destroy anything. We just wanted to help. I know that now. But change is difficult for my generation. We built this empire. We maintained it for millennia. Admitting that our way was not the only way, perhaps not even the best way, that is painful. Amy leaned forward. Your way wasn't wrong. It was just incomplete. Just like our way is incomplete without your patience and careful thought. We need each other. Haxterrell looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. You humans are remarkably persistent. Very well. I will stop opposing the integration initiative, but I reserve the right to complain when you move too fast. And we'll try to remember that sometimes slow is better, Amy promised. In the training facility, Kate Morgan watched a mixed unit of humans. Thessians and Drexians run through combat drills. They moved with a fluidity that would have been impossible a year ago, combining Drexian discipline, human adaptability, and Thessian precision. Dextara stood beside her, arms crossed, looking satisfied. Your methods work, he admitted, but I have added structure where it was needed. Pure chaos is still chaos. Agreed. That's why we're a good team. The unit completed their drill flawlessly. They had faced simulated enemies using tactics from across the galaxy and adapted to each one. More importantly, they trusted each other. Species that had never worked together before now fought as one unit. The other fleets want this training, Dextara said. Admiral Vorkon has made it mandatory for all new recruits. Human and Thessian methods together. That's good. The galaxy is changing. That unknown species that attacked last year, they won't be the last new threat. The Empire needs to be ready to face the unexpected, which is something humans excel at, Dextara said with what might have been respect. Ryan Foster had perhaps the most frustrating job of anyone. He was working with the Imperial Administrative Office to redesign the entire bureaucratic structure of the Empire. It was a massive project that would take years. But slowly, painfully, they were making progress. Belterin had become the project's lead on the Thessian side. The former by-the-book administrator had transformed into an efficiency advocate, though he still insisted on proper documentation. Look at this, Belterin said, showing Ryan a workflow diagram. We have combined your streamlined approval process with our oversight mechanisms. Requests move faster, but we maintain accountability. The best of both approaches. How long until we can implement this across the Empire? 5 years if we are lucky. 10 is more realistic. We are changing systems that have existed for thousands of years. That cannot happen overnight. Ryan sighed. A year ago, he would have been frustrated by that timeline. Now he understood. Some things needed time. Rushing could cause more problems than it solved. Then we'll take the time to do it right, he said. Meanwhile, the Progressive Circle had evolved from a protest movement into something more constructive. Krivik had become its leader, guiding young Thessians and other species who wanted to participate in shaping the Empire's future. But they had learned to balance enthusiasm with wisdom, thanks in part to older mentors who had joined their cause. We are not trying to erase the past, Krivik said at one of their meetings. We are building on it, taking what worked and improving what did not. That is true progress. Jake attended the meeting as an observer. He was proud of what Krivik and the others had accomplished. They had taken the seeds of change and grown them into something sustainable. After the meeting, Velshara invited Jake to her office. She looked different than when they had first met. More relaxed, less burdened. The Empire's transformation had been stressful, but it had also been liberating. Captain Martinez, we have come far in 1 year. We have, Jake agreed. Though there were moments I thought it would all fall apart. As did I, but we persevered. Your people and mine, working together, have created something remarkable. The Empire is not what it was, but it is not what you would make it either. It is something new. Is that a good thing? I believe so. We were dying, Jake. Slowly, imperceptibly, but dying nonetheless. A civilization that stops changing is a civilization that stops living. You reminded us how to live, Jake thought about that. What happens now? Now we continue the work. There are still challenges ahead. Not everyone is happy with the changes. Some colonies are embracing the integration initiative enthusiastically, while others resist. Some species have adapted quickly while others move slowly, but that is natural. Change happens at different speeds for different people. And what about us, the humans? What's our role going forward? Velshara activated a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. The Empire spans 47 star systems, but the galaxy contains billions of stars. There is so much we have not explored, so many species we have not encountered. I would like you to continue doing what you do best. Explore, discover, and when you find new civilizations, perhaps you can help us meet them without making the same mistakes we made in the past. Jake looked at the map, at all that unexplored space. You want us to be ambassadors? I want you to be yourselves. Curious, adaptable, eager to learn and teach. The galaxy needs that spirit. We all do. The Aurora prepared for departure a week later. Its crew had changed. Half the positions were now filled by Thessians who wanted to explore beyond the Empire's borders. Krivik was among them, eager for adventure. So was Lisa Hayes, wanting to learn more about the galaxy before returning to diplomatic service. Torval joined as well, unable.